first big Bollywood blockbuster of 2024 is here, starring Hrithik Roshan. Fighter is about the challenges the Indian Air Force faces with a crew led by Paddy. At first glance, this does seem very similar to US box office smashes of recent years, but aside from a few sequences, Fighter becomes a completely different movie, in some good and other bad ways. Before we get into all of my thoughts on Fighter, if you've seen it or want to check it out, let me know what you thought about it in the comments down below. Both wasting any more time, let's get right into it. Now, I'm not sure how many of you guys knew about this, but apparently Fighter is the beginning of this aerial action franchise. I had no clue about this, and you wouldn't get that hint from the story in this film at all whatsoever, because there is no grander thing going on here. It always just feels like this one mission, this one battle, and I kind of like that. I'm glad I didn't even know it was part of a universe, and it doesn't hint to that at all, so I'm glad I had to actually look it up to find out. But the story within this movie is very, very basic at first. I think the first half of this movie, you can always see where it's headed. There's never really any curveballs that are thrown. It's just your basic fighter pilot type of movie. And then, post-intermission, they throw a pretty great curveball in my opinion, and this is one that isn't on the level of Javan, but it gives you enough of like a, oh shit, where are we going from here moment similar to that. I think it changed a lot story-wise, and it made it unique to the comparison that a lot of people were making from the trailers, which is Top Gun Maverick. Now, obviously, Top Gun Maverick was a massive box office hit in the US, made over $1 billion, a post-COVID banger, and even within Hollywood itself, any fighter pilot movie that came out after Top Gun instantly got that comparison made to it. So I don't think it's necessarily weird that this got a comparison to Top Gun Maverick, because honestly, it's not like Maverick as much as you think it is. I feel like the conflicts, especially in this movie, are way more country-based. Top Gun Maverick doesn't really even touch politics, and this one fully dives into it. Obviously, that's what Bollywood does. That's what they like to do. That's what they've always done, and I don't really see a flaw in that. I think that's actually really interesting. It's an interesting way to take it rather than, like Top Gun Maverick, it's kind of clashes within the roster of fighter pilots, but here, the story within the fighter pilots is the motivational one. That's the one that is a little bit happier, and then you get to all of the other stuff with the terrorists and the other countries, and I think that's what really separates this film. Because to be honest, other than the first like 20 minutes of this movie, which in my opinion are pretty much comparable shot to sequences in Top Gun Maverick, the rest of this film isn't comparable to that film at all whatsoever. It is completely different. There's no similarity in order of events, story, character resolutions. Everything else is completely different, and I absolutely love that. There is one mission though within those first 20 minutes that is basically like an exact copy of what Top Gun Maverick did, and there are some things that work better in this movie than in that movie, but overall, obviously the sequence was better in Top Gun Maverick. It's basically like this training sequence, and I really enjoyed the sequence in this film, but they have those benefits from not shooting practically where they're able to do batshit crazy things with the planes, but in Top Gun you actually feel it more viscerally. I also felt like in this film it was much more difficult to keep track of the aerial action, and that's a big problem, especially when most of your action sequences take place in the air. But what I will say is at least this different visual style, the one of not shooting it practically, allows for a little bit more of a dynamic visual style. But I think what separates this is that they're able to use different slow-mo techniques, just different fighter pilot techniques. Everything just looks a lot smoother and more badass, even though obviously like some physics simulations may be off. I think generally it creates a better flow of the action. I think where this movie is separated from other just action films in general that we've gotten recently in Bollywood is the fact that the characters actually feel like they have a lot of heart here. It's not necessarily just a backstory, which obviously is very important, and almost every single one of the characters has a great backstory, but a lot of the current action films in Bollywood just completely lack character connection. And here, even though the love story isn't at the forefront between Hrithik Roshan and Deepika Padukone, I still feel every single bit of emotion between them. I can't even tell you if they have chemistry because I feel like the love story was never even fully explored as much as it could have been, but at least just based on the small moments we got, it definitely worked for me. Hrithik Roshan just puts on a masterclass here in a performance that's not even just like yelling and just lashing out, but it's more just him sitting there and taking all of this emotion that's being thrown at him. I think all of those emotional sequences work very, very well as well, and I think also his character lore is great. Continuing with the character stuff, I mean, the villains in this film, they're not the most layered, you know, they're just like general terrorists, but I like that there's one that's kind of representing the country in the aerial section of it, and then there's one that's just like a straight up terrorist that not even the country agrees with, but is still the main villain. And again, they're not necessarily deep characters, but they are so scary. Like, they are genuinely, they put so much fear into you as an audience member. And that kind of leads me into the action, right? The action is pretty great, I'm not gonna lie. It's from the director of Pathaan, War, Bang Bang, and coming up he's gonna be directing Tiger vs. Pathaan, and this is easily his best action work to date. I think War is a very close second just in terms of hand-to-hand combat, but the way that the aerial stunts are directed in this film, I think works really well. Obviously, it's very CGI heavy, not practical like we've seen aerial stuff done before, but I think it's a pretty good blend of the both. Now, my biggest flaw with the action does come in the final battle, because I think the whole final sequence, and it is a very long one, is absolutely brilliant. The way that they transition to not even have Paddy, he's completely out of the story of this final mission, then they bring him back into it, and then they put him deeper, and then obviously it's like a 1v1 type of thing by the end. There's a great transition of story throughout this entire film, but by the time we get to that 1v1 at the end, it does get very, very preachy, and I think it's so long that by the end you're like, okay, dude, shut up and let's fight. Like, you know what I mean? But aside from the action, I think obviously this film succeeds in the character moments, and that's what very much separates it from a lot of other modern Bollywood blockbusters. Overall, I really, really liked Fighter. I think it was something pretty different that we get from Bollywood, and a lot of the character stuff, aerial stunts, action, everything does come together very, very nicely. Overall, I'm going to give Fighter around a 7.5 out of 10. I will probably rewatch this one pretty soon because, again, I really enjoyed my time with it. As always, if you've seen or want to check out Fighter, let me know what you guys think about it in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Peace.